I used to think turning 70 meant the end of the road, until a secret trust fund, a hidden letter, and a scheming stepson turned my life upside down. Raymond never promised me forever, but he left something behind that made me fight like hell. Do you believe that even in your twilight years, a woman can still start over? My name is Maggie, and you probably wouldn't believe this all began with nothing more than a rainstorm. That afternoon, I was standing alone under the awning of the community center. No umbrella, no coat, just a tired retiree frowning at the downpour hammering the sidewalk. Rain has a way of making you feel small. And truth be told, I'd felt lost for a long time. Love, to me, was a distant memory, something that once bloomed in youth, but had long since been torn from my heart when the man I loved most left without so much as a goodbye. I lived a well-behaved life, nearly 4 decades as an accountant. I saved every penny, clocked in early, clocked out late. I filled the void in my heart with board meetings, spreadsheets, and too many cups of black coffee. I told myself, if you keep busy enough, maybe you won't notice the loneliness. But the truth is, when you retire and the office doors close for good, those empty spaces you tried to ignore come crashing back with no mercy. Then came a voice, warm, polite, with just enough mischief to feel human. "Excuse me, ma'am, mind if I share this spot?" I turned. The man, Raymond, was holding up a large black umbrella. His hair was pure white, frame tall and lean, face gentle with the kind of eyes that have seen storms and survived them. Not overly friendly, but kind enough to make you feel safe. I don't know why I nodded. Maybe I was tired. Maybe it was the cold rain. Or maybe there was something in him that made me want to trust again, even just for a few steps down the street. Raymond Walker, retired mechanical engineer. "Live right across the street," he said with a grin. "Sometimes I stop by here for dominoes with the other old-timers." For the first time in days, I laughed. We walked together under that umbrella. No rush, no awkward small talk. Later, we'd bump into each other in the park now and then, Raymond with that same slow stroll and a spark in his eyes that hadn't faded with age. It was strange. We didn't date. No holding hands. No texting goodnight. But every short conversation made me feel lighter. Slowly, Raymond became a part of my routine, a part one didn't want to let go of. When he invited me over for dinner one evening at his little apartment, I hesitated, but said yes. His home was a bit cluttered, full of old engineering books and sun-faded family photos. I asked, "Where's your family?" He replied quietly, "My wife passed long ago. Now it's just me and a fridge that sometimes hums like it misses someone." I laughed. He smiled gently, then looked at me a long time before saying, "Maggie, what do you think about 2 old folks living together like companions? No marriage, no strings, just waking up and knowing there's someone to say good morning to." I froze. My heart pounded like it had forgotten how to beat. I thought he was just a friend. But in that moment, I knew he'd seen me. He'd seen the silence I carried, the loneliness I masked with polite smiles. That night, I didn't answer. But later, I sent a message. I think I like that idea. A week later, I moved in. No titles, no promises, but it was the beginning of something quietly beautiful, late in life, but no less real for both of us. Life with Raymond flowed gently, like an old jazz tune, simple, warm, without needing any dramatic highs. We shared chores, humble dinners, quiet mornings watering plants, and listening to the radio. Raymond had a habit of peeling apples for me every morning and always left a pair of soft slippers by the door. I used to think if the rest of life was just these final years, then I was lucky to spend them with someone like him. But like all beautiful things, that time ended too soon. Raymond had a heart attack one cold winter morning while watering the plants on the balcony. I ran to him, holding his trembling body, screaming for an ambulance in panic. But it was too late. He passed away in my arms, as gently as a leaf falling from a branch, without a single word of goodbye. The funeral was simple. Some old friends came and shared a few cheerful stories. But the one person I paid the most attention to didn't say anything. Richard, Raymond's only son, sat silently in the corner, his face unreadable. I tried to greet him after the service, but the look he gave me was cold as ice. The next day, while I was sorting through Raymond's papers, the doorbell rang. It was Richard. He didn't come inside. No greetings. No small talk. "Maggie," he began, his voice sharp, "this house is in my father's name, and I'm here to take it back." I tightened my grip on the photo album in my hands, trying to stay calm. I know I wasn't his legal wife, but for the past 3 years I took care of him. Richard cut in. "And that's supposed to earn you his property?" I froze. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being stripped bare under a harsh spotlight. No marriage certificate, no legal rights, just an old woman who had lived with a man and now had nothing. 2 days later, I moved out of the apartment. Still hadn't cried, but inside, I felt just as empty as the house I left behind. It wasn't until I went to the bank to withdraw a bit of cash that everything changed. The account, I thought, only had a few thousand, showed a balance of $257,000. I couldn't believe it. Where had this come from? The bank manager, a middle-aged man named Griffin, brought me into his office. "This is a living trust," he explained. "It was created 3 years ago by Raymond Walker. You're the sole beneficiary." My heart clenched. Raymond, he never told me. Not a word. But every deposit, every transaction was right there in the records. Proof. Clear as day. Griffin paused, then added, "There's just one thing. The trust had been temporarily frozen." I blinked. Why? A medical report was submitted a few months ago, claiming Mr. Walker may not have been mentally competent when he created it. A petition was filed to the court. The person who submitted it was Richard Walker. A chill ran down my spine. The pieces began falling into place. He had known all along, and he acted to make sure I'd get nothing. I left the bank with a heart heavy as stone. People on the street rushed by as usual, but to me, time had stopped. Raymond hadn't just loved me. He protected me in the quietest, deepest way. But now I had to protect myself. That night, I opened an old drawer and pulled out a business card a friend had once given me. Maggie Randall, retired attorney, volunteer at the Community Legal Center. I dialed the number. A calm, steady voice answered, "This is Maggie. How can I help you?" I swallowed hard. For the first time in my life, I said, "Please help me fight. I don't want silence to be the last thing Raymond left behind." I used to think that once justice prevailed, I'd finally find peace. After attorney Maggie Randall and I gathered enough evidence to present in court, the legal battle with Richard truly began. We spent weeks requesting medical records from Lakeside Medical Center, combing through every clause in the trust, comparing signatures and hunting down witnesses. Eventually, we found George, Raymond's old friend, and his testimony was the final piece that tipped the scales in my favor. His video statement was played in court, along with a handwritten letter Raymond had written before setting up the trust. The judge ruled the trust was valid, I was the rightful beneficiary, and the court would consider launching a separate investigation into possible legal fraud on Richard's part. I still remember that moment in the courtroom, when Maggie gently squeezed my hand and whispered, "We did it." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt like someone had peeled off a suit of armor that had been fused to my skin for far too long. But victory didn't heal my heart. I returned to my old apartment. Every corner was coated in dust. There was no scent of apples in the morning, no creaky radio playing in the background, no one asking what I wanted for dinner. I thought maybe I could finally sleep, but on that first night I stayed wide awake, not out of fear, but out of emptiness. Each morning I sat in the kitchen, staring at a cooling cup of tea, wondering, after you win the battle, what do you do with all the shattered pieces? 2 weeks later, I went in for my regular checkup. I'd done it for years, partly habit, partly a promise to Raymond. But this time, after blood work and a chest x-ray, the doctor asked me to come back to go over the results. I knew that silence, that terrifying quiet before the world collapses. The diagnosis, early-stage lung cancer. Surgery was urgent, followed by a treatment plan lasting at least 6 months. The estimated cost? Around $150,000. I walked out of the hospital, gripping the folder of results like it might disappear if I let go. The wind rushed through my coat, but what made me shiver was knowing I was about to fight again, not for Raymond this time, but for my own life. The trust fund Raymond left me, most of which still hadn't been touched, was my only hope now. And that made me cry, not because I was greedy, but because Raymond had seen this coming before I did. He planned for this every step. A man who never proposed, never made grand declarations, never signed a paper about love, had signed a trust in quiet, unwavering faith that I deserved to live. I underwent surgery on a strange, clear Friday morning. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was sunlight streaming through the hospital window, casting a shimmer on the ceiling. And I thought, I'm still here. I still have time. The days that followed were brutal. Every breath, every cough tugged at the incision. But I was patient. I endured. I wrote in a journal each day, not letting memories slip through the cracks. And then one sleepless night, I pulled out my old accounting notebook, the one I used to track expenses when I lived with Raymond. On the last page in the corner, I wrote my first line in months. I used the money you left to save myself. Now I want to use it to repair something in someone else. On the day I was discharged, I sat on a bench outside the hospital watching people pass by. In the distance, an elderly woman was helping a frail man take small steps forward. No one noticed them. No one knew who they used to be. And in that moment, I understood people like us, widowed, aging, forgotten, don't need pity. We need a place to begin again. Raymond gave me a second chance. And I'll do the same for others. I survived. But surviving isn't the end. It's the beginning. From here, I move forward, not for him, but with him, in a new form, through action. 3 months after the surgery, my body was healing, but my soul still felt empty, like that old fridge that no longer made a sound. One morning, while sipping tea in my tiny kitchen, I stared at a small notebook where I had once scribbled. I used the money he left me to save myself. Now, I want to use it to fix something for someone else. That line haunted me. The idea kept flickering to life every time I saw someone who reminded me of me. An older person moving quietly through a crowd, an old man sighing on a park bench, a lonely woman in the grocery store counting out her change. People didn't really see them, and if they did, it was often as burdens as relics. One afternoon, I shared my thoughts with Maggie Randall, the older lawyer who once helped me fight Richard. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Then start Maggie, she said, like it had always been inside me. Use what you have. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. We sat together in my old kitchen, sketching ideas on the backs of envelopes, napkins, and calendar pages. I called it Second Chance. No frills, no big mission statement, just what it was. A place to begin again, no matter your age, no matter how broken you feel. I cleared out the spare bedroom in my tiny apartment. Out went the bed and came a round wooden table, a few plastic chairs, a kettle of tea, some old files, and a corkboard on the wall. No sign outside. No need to register as an organization. We started like that, a safe space in every sense of the word. The first person to knock was Mrs. Louise, a 72-year-old widow who lived downstairs. She sat shyly, avoiding eye contact, hands trembling as she held a notice from the bank. My husband died, and my son had me sign some financial papers, she whispered, but now the bank's taking the house. I don't understand any of it. I handed her a cup of tea. No rush, no judgment. Later, Maggie came by and sat beside me, gently walking Louise through each clause. Before she left, Louise gripped my hand and said, "Thank you." I thought nobody listened anymore. When I closed the door, I didn't smile, but deep in my chest bloomed a strange feeling. Not triumph, not relief, but rightness. Then came Gary, once a bus driver, now living alone after losing his wife. He didn't come for advice. He just wanted to sit and not be so lonely. One day he brought an old ukulele and strummed a few broken notes. "Maggie," he said, "I can't remember the songs, but my fingers remember how it felt." "That's the best kind of memory," I told him. I opened the door twice a week, calling them afternoon tea sessions. Slowly, word spread around the neighborhood. Elderly folks, lonely retirees unsure what to do with their time, started showing up. Some brought cookies. Some sat silently, but they came back. The next week, and the one after that, one woman said once, "This place feels like a room without mirrors. I don't have to face my age here. I just exist." And I understood older people don't always need healing. They just need a place where they're not made to feel like a burden. 3 months in, Maggie suggested we file with the city as a semi-independent community hub. With the paperwork, we secured a small micro-grant for local initiatives. I used the money to print some flyers, buy extra chairs, and hire a part-time legal assistant, a young law graduate eager to learn. We even partnered with a local health station to offer wellness check-ins. I didn't want a big center. I didn't want to launch a nonprofit. I just wanted to keep the door open for someone to walk in and feel seen again. One morning, I arrived early to set up and found a note left on the table. It read in neat handwriting, "Thank you." I thought I had no chances left. I sat down, placed my hand gently on the paper, like it was a letter from Raymond. In my head, I could hear his voice. "Maggie, I knew you'd do something good with it." And I had. Not for glory, not to prove a point, but so that those who once felt forgotten could have a place to begin again. Just like I was given my second chance. One autumn afternoon, as I was reorganizing the bookshelf in the small meeting room of second chances, something unexpected happened. I heard a knock at the door, not loud, not rushed, but hesitant, like the person on the other side was still unsure of their decision. When I opened the door, I thought it might be Lou or Gary arriving early. But no, it was Richard. He didn't look anything like he did the last time we met in court. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes tired, his beard patchy and unkempt. He stood there with none of his old arrogance, none of the resentment or anger. Just empty. He stammered. "I don't have anywhere else to go." I didn't respond. I just looked at him. "My wife left," he continued, staring down at the tiled floor. "I lost my job. I lost custody of my kid. Everything." He raised his hand slightly, maybe to steady the tremble in his voice, then let it fall. "I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking for a place to stay, somewhere to sleep for a few weeks." I could have said no. I could have reminded him of the day he kicked me out of the house, of the accusations he threw at his father, of the legal motion he filed to strip away the trust Raymond left me. But instead, I said quietly, "There's a room downstairs. It's old but usable. You can stay for 3 months. Richard looked up, eyes red, not from gratitude, from shock. He didn't expect me to say yes. 3 months, I repeated. During that time, you'll work with a social worker from the center I partner with. No drama. And after 3 months, you get on your feet. Understood? He nodded. That evening, I set out a towel, a light blanket, and a new pair of wool socks for him. As he stepped into the cold basement room, I remembered my own first nights at Raymond's house. Quiet, lonely, but with someone upstairs waiting for me to come out of the dark. For the next 2 weeks, we barely spoke. He kept his room clean, washed his dishes, and sometimes helped carry heavy boxes for the center. But he kept his distance. Then one evening, while I was washing dishes, Richard stood silently in the kitchen doorway. He didn't say a word, just stood there for a while. I let him. Finally, he spoke. I used to think you were just leeching off my dad. I used to hate you. I thought you were only with him for what he could give. I kept washing the dishes. I didn't turn around. But now I understand, his voice cracked. What he gave you wasn't money. It was trust, something I never earned from him. I placed the last plate on the rack and turned to face him. My eyes were dry, but my heart wasn't. Before he passed, he told me, one day you'd understand, I said. He hoped for that. Richard lowered his head, trembling. Maybe today is that day. The next morning, when I got up early to make tea for the center, I found a small note placed neatly on the kitchen table. His voice echoed through the scrawled handwriting. Thank you for not closing the door when I knocked. I don't deserve that chance, but I'll try not to waste it. You're not my mother, but I hope one day I can be worthy of the kindness you gave so freely. Richard, I folded the note. I didn't cry. I didn't need to, because I realized something. I didn't need to forgive to be free. I just needed to let go. The week after, I changed the sheets in the guest room and placed my favorite book on the pillow. The room was empty again, but it wasn't cold anymore. It was a doorway for someone else someday to start over. I don't know where Richard went or what he'll do next, but I know for the first time in his life, He left without taking something from someone. And I did too. I left behind Raymond's shadow, that old house, the years of being dismissed, to live a life that matters. Not to save anyone, but to be there when they're ready to save themselves. Second chances aren't always pretty. They're not always smooth or memorable, but they're real. And if you've read this far, I want you to know one thing. No matter how old you are, no matter how many times you've stumbled, the next chapter could still be your best one. If you're brave enough to turn the page,